Hello, Dr. Wolgast. Welcome to Deep Into Sleep podcast.
Thank you. It's super a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
I'm excited too. I actually ran into you in the sleep conference this year, right?
Yeah.
And I know you're a board certified behavioral sleep medicine expert too, but you have a very special niche that none of my other guests ever had. How about you introduce yourself to our audience first?
Absolutely. So I'm excited to tell you about that. My niche is college counseling and college students sleep. And I came about it in a very personal way, which is when I arrived at college myself in the late 80s, I had a pretty deviated septum that I was born with and grew up with. Didn't really think anything of it, didn't know it was a problem, but I snored terribly and basically lived my adolescent years with bad sleep apnea, which, these days would hopefully get picked up and diagnosed and treated. For me, it didn't get fixed until I was a freshman in college. I was playing basketball. I got hit in the jaw, which got me to an ear, nose, throat doctor. And thank goodness I did. He looked at my jaw and said, "Your jaw's fine, but how do you breathe through your nose?" And I said, "Yeah, I have never breathed through my nose." He said, "Well, let's fix that." And that happened midway through my freshman year in college. So I started college the way I ended high school, which was tired all the time, trouble staying awake in class, trouble, studying enough. I could fall asleep at a red light while I was driving, all the things we look for in sleep apnea. And the beginning of my second semester of college, I had this huge change where suddenly I was sleeping well through the night. With apnea, your listeners may not know this, but I probably was waking up hundreds of times during the course of the night. So sleeping terribly, waking up exhausted, tired throughout the day. Suddenly I was able to sleep. I was able to study. I could stay awake in class. I was funnier. I had better relationships. Like, everything got better. It was kind of like that miracle experience of having a bad sleep problem effectively treated. And it just caught my mind to a place where I was so interested in sleep and how much sleep could change a person's life, my life. I just started reading and consuming everything I could around sleep. Fast forward later, I did well enough in school. I got to go to grad school. I got my psychology degree as a psychologist. And the job I fell into after my internship was at a university counseling center at the University of Pennsylvania. I quickly became the sleep guy. This is before there were board certifications. And I just would do presentations and talk to people about sleep and our new psychologists. And eventually I got board certified in behavior sleep medicine like you, and have been, treating sleep problems for college students ever since. And I love it. It's the thing that it gets me up in the morning and gets me excited, is doing sleep consultations with students, consulting with university counseling center staff at other universities. It really gets me going because it is a big problem on college campuses, like almost everywhere else. And it's my favorite work, which, by the way, it leads me to, and then I'll stop introducing myself. I have created my own private practice where I treat sleep problems, particularly insomnia and chronic nightmares. It's at helpmesleep.org. Easy to find me and easy to look into what kind of work you can do with me, or if you want me to come and talk to your group, I love doing that stuff too.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to take that offer, and because I really think, first, I admire how your passion in this field, right? I think, isn't that a wonderful thing that we love what we do, and we're so passionate and seeing all the patients and really assist them to get better and better, and we all have different niche. And the other thing is, I realize even within my own group practice, we have like 20-ish providers, but I was the only one who specialized in treating insomnia and sleep related issues. But when I do case consultations with other providers, sometimes, they will talk about young adults, this like mood disorder and other issues. Sometimes just to me, it sounds like, wow, I suspect some sleep issues. Have you ever considered that, right? No
Yes,
one even know about that. So not many providers know anything about sleep.
that's right. Because, and I was just doing research for a talk I'm doing in a couple of months. Um, Most of us, whether you're a psychologist, a social worker, a physician, or a nurse, the training we get around sleep is about 1 to 3 hours is what it seems to be. And there's a few places where you might get 5 or 6 hours of training. And most of that, if you're in medical school, it's about sleep apnea. But most of that, if you're in another place, is just very limited information. So we don't know. And I think one of the reasons I get excited to talk about people in the world of college mental health is because it's a really prime time in age, that's sort of young adult phase, where you can make a big impact on someone's life for the rest of their lives, for their whole adult life, maybe. And that, the hard part is I bump into the same thing you do, which is no one's been trained. There's very little training, and some people have found things and they know things, but there's not a whole lot of integration of information that they may have learned. So, and to me, I have so many things to say. The 60% of college students, if you ask them, do you have problems with your sleep? 60% will say yes, right?
Wow.
That's huge. That's
More
more
than
than the general public, more than the general population. And when you survey those same students, they will also show you, they will tell you, yeah, my quality of life is lower compared to the people who sleep better. I have more depressed mood and more anxious moods. And I'm sure you and I see that. The less you sleep, the more those things go up. And for college students, their academics are worse. Their GPA, their ability to study and perform academically goes down. And you can show that. Research has shown that again and again. So there's clearly a need and there's clearly a problem. One of the issues with the university situation is attitude. In general, people think sleep maybe it's not that big of a deal. On college campuses, it's often even more so, right? You pull an all-nighter every now and then, it's fine, it's what you do. And that's not really helpful.
I can imagine college students possibly sleep is the first thing they let go.
Right.
Parties, like schoolwork, prepare for
Yeah.
exams. What is sleep, right? I remember when I was in college, I studied in different college in America, and they have this room. Every campus has certain rooms, classrooms for all-nighters
Oh,
before exam days.
yeah, I
We all
hate
know where
that.
to go if we plan to
That's
study all
right.
night.
And that's one of my takeaway messages for universities is, first of all, let's get rid of the whole all-nighter, mentality. We have shown that again and again with research, it's ineffective. People who stay up all night and maybe they get to study 6 hours, if they had actually slept, the amount of work they accomplished in those 6 hours could have been accomplished in about 3 hours if they had gotten a good night's sleep. And they'll retain it better, they'll perform it better when they're tested. And the research is really clear. All-nighters are terrible. But universities still encourage them. Like at my university, they give out free coffee 24 hours a day during finals. Like, that's a terrible idea. You can't do that. So it's hard to fight against the just the way the culture is built around universities, but it needs to be changed.
Yeah, that remind me, when I treat teenagers
Mhm.
and mostly teenagers, because what motivates them to come in to seek help? Mostly because the parents notice the academic performance is not
Yes.
good, right? And
Yep.
then they normally don't think about sleep issues first. They think about other issues, possibly after several rounds, and then eventually some providers ask the question about sleep, then they come in to treat their sleep. So I'm wondering for young adults, for college students, finally, they transit out the household. There's no parents on top of them. and all rely on their own self-consciousness, their own self-control.
Right.
So what are some most common sleep problems you have seen among college students, and what are some motivations to, get them in to see you to treat
Right.
them?
You couldn't have said that better. We have all in our field, we've all seen that. People show up and sleep is on the list, but it's number 3 or 4. And then when you and I kind of clear the dust away, it's a little higher than number 3 or 4. This is pretty important. And to add to your point, I talk to students, freshmen every year, and I say, look, if I asked you, like today it's August, let's say it's August 30th, you're starting school tomorrow as a university student. If I asked you right now where you were on a Tuesday in February at 1:55, almost every college freshman could say, oh, on Tuesdays at 1:55, I was doing this and this and this. And the high school students in the United States these days are so prescribed with what they do all day, from the moment they wake up until literally the moment they turn off their light, that when they get to college, university, like you just said, like their parents aren't there. Maybe they have 2 classes each day. Maybe they have 3. They don't have 6 hours of classes and a bus to catch and practice after school and stay. They might go from having 12 structured hours a day to having 3. And I've never met an incoming college student who wasn't thrilled by that and thought, oh, my life is going to be so much easier. And then they get into classes and they realize, well, I'm staying up until 2:30 in the morning, and I wake up at 8:30 in the morning, and now I'm tired all afternoon and I have to study, and classes are harder anyway. So all of that is part of what happens when they get here, and why it becomes challenging pretty quickly, usually within a month, when their sleep drops off. So what gets students into my office usually is I'm having more fights with my boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other. I'm having more trouble with my roommate. And it's leading me to have these problems. I'm more anxious. I don't want to go back to my room anymore because I know we're going to fight. I'm upset about this. And now my academics are a problem because I'm spending so much time on this other thing, et cetera, et cetera. I feel more depressed because of all these things going on. What I will say, and you already said this, but I'll reinforce it for college students, they will come in saying, I'm really anxious. That's the number one reason students come into a college counseling center. Or I'm feeling really down. I don't feel like myself. That's number 2. Usually number 3, and there's research for this too, number 3 is sleep. The 3rd most common reason people come in, or students will tell you, this is impacting my life and my academics, is sleep. When I meet with them, and of course I'm biased and I'll admit that, and we start to dust off some of the roommate or relationship or family or, my professor is horrible kind of conversation, I find out, oh, you're only sleeping 6 hours a night. And on the weekends, you stay up until 3 or 4 and you sleep in until noon or 1. And then you try and wake up Monday morning at 7:45. This is not, your body doesn't do this very well. You're not giving it a chance to recover. And when you don't recover, you don't have relationships well, and you don't think well, you don't study well. I'll give you one example. I had a student in my office, this is probably 3 years ago now, who I had met with before, and just a lovely, young woman, sophomore probably. And we were talking about some pretty heavy things, but one day she came in my office just crying and upset and angry at what, this guy had said to her and was doing and saying. And I'm listening to her and I'm thinking, I've seen her deal with worse and do better, like just deal better. Like, and this was not nothing. It was a pretty unpleasant sort of breakup-y situation that was a little nasty, but I had seen her do better under worse circumstances. And after she really let a lot out, I said, I'm the sleep guy. Tell me how much you've been sleeping lately. And she said, oh yeah, 2 nights ago, I didn't sleep at all. I think last night I got 4 hours because I'm so upset. And I said, look, what happened here is bad and it's awful and I'm sorry. And I really want you to get a good night's sleep tonight. And I want you to call me tomorrow. And I want to hear how you're feeling. And then we have the rest of our session and we process and talk through. And she called me the next day and she said, I got 8 hours of sleep. And I got to tell you, I feel great. And yeah, that guy's a jerk. It's terrible, right? But I feel fine. And so that's a really good example of what you and I both know and see all the time.
Yeah, well, I love that example because that exactly tell us when you sleep better, you actually can think more clear, be
Yes.
more rational.
Yes.
Also, those coping strategies for emotion regulation, for deal with stress, for being more resilient, right?
Yeah,
That
exactly.
ability really start working.
So, and let me take that another ratchet up, because one of the most pressing issues on college campuses and really anywhere is suicide, right? And there are two things sleep related that have been shown distinctly in the general population, but also for college student aged folks that are predictors for suicide risk. And one is chronic insomnia, and the other one is chronic nightmares. So if someone walks in your office or my office, especially an 18 to 24-year-old, and says, I have chronic insomnia, I can't sleep, and it's almost every night of the week. One of the things you have to be assessing for and curious about is their thoughts about death and suicide. And if someone talks to you, your friend, your parents, your doctor, and says, yeah, I have nightmares several nights a week, assessing for suicide risk is super vital. And this is like where we started this conversation. Nobody taught me that in grad school. This is not being taught in medical school. This research is relatively new. Michael Perlis at the University of Pennsylvania kicked off a lot of this. It's fascinating research. And it makes sense when you look into it, but it's just not something that a lot of us were trained in or aware of. So it's important. And it's not just because somebody had a bad breakup. It's because people might be thinking about suicide when it's 3 a.m. and they can't sleep.
Right. Yeah, I feel like this whole field, right, as clinical providers, we need to keep on training ourselves and learning all these new things.
Right.
I know there's more and more research connections between severe mental health, mental disorders, suicidality, and the sleep quality. I think that's important for us to ask the questions, and possibly important for families, friends to ask the question too.
Yes. Right. Yeah. I focus on talking to the psychologists, the social workers, the nurses, and the physicians, but I also do new student orientation, and I talk to the parents and I say, look, you got to be listening for this. And not only do I want you to listen for it and take it seriously, I want you to model healthy sleep attitudes. So if your son or daughter or nephew, niece, or whatever says to you, oh yeah, I got to pull an all-nighter next week to finish that, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, that's not a good way to do it. Plan ahead, prepare, and even if you're behind, you're going to do better the next day if you get a night of sleep rather than try and stay up. Even if you sleep 3 hours, you're still missing out on a lot of brain recovery time that you need to perform.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really get this. Well, we think we can catch up on sleep, right? Even myself, before in graduate school, I have to admit, I did similar things, all-nighter, and then I have to sleep for several days and feel awful for several days. But I thought I'm catching back up my sleep, but looks like we cannot.
No, the damage is done. I was the same way as you. I mean, like, hey, it feels good, and it does feel good, but what's lost is lost. You can replenish once it's been lost, but it's, what you lost while you didn't have the sleep is not coming back.
Yeah, I remember Dr. Gradner used to mention on my show that even we sleep like 15 minutes earlier, if we just get 10 or 15 minutes more sleep per night, our performance the next day actually gonna be boosted.
Yeah. You may not be able to notice it in the moment, but we can, in research labs, can show that that's true. We can show the difference is real. And that, one of the things I was looking up preparing to talk to you was, in the 80s, when I started college, the average, there's a study on how much sleep college students got, and it was about 7 hours and 45 minutes, which for me rings true. And if I go any group of college students I meet with these days, and I say, okay, so how much sleep are people getting? And I have them put their hands up and whatever. And it's true, there was research in 2018, it's very consistent with the students I see. It's about 6.5 hours a night.
Oh.
So, and if they say, oh, well, you slept 7 and 3/4 and I sleep 6.5, that doesn't sound that different. It's massive. It's a huge change, to the extent where, if this is what I say to the students, I'm like, okay, so I slept 7 hours and 45 minutes. It's the same if you said, all right, I sleep 6.5 hours a night. Brad, you sleep the same as you always do, except one night a week you pull an all-nighter. It's about the same. So what would you prefer? I mean, there's a huge difference when you're getting 15 minutes less, and especially when you stretch it out to an hour or more, your body doesn't get the chance to recover and do the healing and the processing it needs to do while it's asleep.
Right. And I think the sleep debt, right, just accumulate. Every day you sleep 1 less hour than other people. And then over the week, you lost 1 day of sleep.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. People compare to each other about everything else. They compete about schoolwork, about athlete work, about all these other things, but they don't really compete about sleep.
Or if they do, they compete about how little sleep they got, right? It's the opposite. It's the wrong direction. But when I was, like I told you my story, when I was in college, I was so in love with sleep. I was that guy. I was like, guys, I got 9 hours and 45 minutes of sleep last night. And everybody else was like, what is wrong with you? So I've always been a sleep nerd since those days. And I wish more people would get competitive with getting enough sleep and people will often ask me in talks like, well, can I get too much sleep? And the answer is probably not. If you're sleeping more than, like, college students can't sleep because they're doing that recovery catch up. I went to bed at 3 a.m. and now I'm waking up at 3 p.m. So if you're so sleep deprived that you're catching up for a long period, once or twice, I mean, that's how your body works. If you're sleeping night after night after night after night, 10 hours or more, or even 9.5 hours or more, there may be something else going on. There may be a reason your body needs more sleep. And maybe you have a sleep disorder, or maybe you have a health problem that hasn't been picked up yet that makes your body need more sleep. Usually that's what I'm finding when I bump into those folks.
Yeah, I like those warning signs, right? It's not just you don't sleep enough. If you constantly sleep too much,
yes,
that's a warning sign too.
It's a sign. Yeah, it's like a little flag going off of like, why do you need this much more sleep than almost everyone else? Some people are built to need more sleep, but usually not 10 hours a night or more. If that's the case, like, let's call your doctor, let's get some appointments to check your blood and look into other things that are going on. Yeah. And maybe it's also a sleep disorder. So.
Right. So I'm so happy that I get to talk to you today, because I'm thinking clinically, I have several college students, right, with sleep struggles. So I find it's really hard to treat them.
Aha! Welcome to my world.
Right. So I don't know how, because I can give them education about sleep science. Sometimes they even agree, oh, it totally makes sense. Oh, I never know that. Now I know. Yeah. But somehow, sometimes I feel like I'm competing with their electronic device. I'm competing with TikTok, yeah. All this fun stuff. Yeah. And they just could not control themselves.
Right.
To fall asleep.
The whole culture of being a college student, right? You have
Yeah.
roommates and you never had a roommate before. Now you have 30 people living in 50 yards with video games and TikTok. And yeah, that you just described my whole world of working in a college counseling center. And the other thing I'll add to that is when an 18 to 22-year-old does get a good night of sleep, they get a great night of sleep. When you're in that age group, your body is really primed to get some of the best deep sleep that you get in your whole life, other than being very, very, very little. So as an adult, these are your best deep sleep hours. So you could talk to a college student who's having all these sleep problems. You might convince them to get some better sleep. They might have one really good night of sleep and say, oh, I'm fixed. I'm all better. And they may not come back, or they might come back and say, I'm good. I got it. And the truth is, we both know it's more subtle than that. One good night is great, but making the changes to TikTok while you're in bed, or video games until 3 a.m, or, you know, spending all of your free time on your bed doing every single activity that you do, these are not good things for your sleep. And so it's changing that person's individual relationship with sleep and their bedroom environment and their sort of culture and thinking about how sleep is important to them. It's taking small steps along the route towards a healthy attitude towards sleep.
Mm.
And I say that when I work with the 50 and 60-year-old crowd, they're in. When they're like, no, I've been dealing with this for decades, and I know one good night is not the end of the story. But a 19-year-old might think, oh man, Saturday night was awesome. I feel great. Thank you. Yeah, let's talk let's talk some more. How about Tuesday night? What was that like? So
Mm. Yeah, sounds like they are super live at the moment, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and easy to be satisfied, but they do things possibly not think about too much consequences. And sounds
right.
like the change, the motivation of change really need to come from inside of them. They
Right.
need to really shift how they think about sleep, how they think about health.
And I'll tell you a quick thing on that, and then one other thing about more of where I'm at. It's also super helpful if they can get a roommate or their, significant other to be on the same page.
Oh.
If their roommate is, oh, whatever, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or I'll sleep over winter break. That's not a helpful attitude. And having them do some of the education of their roommate or friend or whoever, I'm like, well, no, actually, here's what Dr. Wolgast told me, can be really helpful. It's often working uphill, but most people will come around to learning about sleep, because I find people are usually pretty interested in learning about it.
Mm.
The other thing I'll say, because we're talking about student culture and what students think and what students do, there was a great study published last year, Schmidt and others from Penn State looked at the way college students tell people like me, college counselors, about their problems, about their sleep problems, and how the counselors deal with it.
Mm.
And the sad truth, and this is no surprise to me and probably not to you, is that the counselors, so the student says to the counselor on a form, yeah, I have sleep problems. And the counselor misses it most of the time, right? Because they're also saying, well, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. This is where we started our conversation today. I have these other things going on, and sleep. And this is probably part of the problem with our culture too, is, we see the big A of anxiety, the big D of depression, and we're all in on that. And we think, well, if we fix this, the other things will get better. And they might, but sleep is one of the most stubborn problems to come along with anxiety, depression, and everything else. You can treat depression until they're not depressed, but their problem with sleep, their insomnia, remains super consistent. That's not helpful. And so 49 to 69% of students said, I have a sleep problem. But when the clinician was asked later, what did you work on with this student? only 16% said we did sleep. So they missed 75% of the students who probably had some kind of sleep issue that could have been helped. Not necessarily a disorder, but that's not necessary. We're not talking about anxiety disorders all the time either.
Yeah.
So the culture has to change with the healthcare providers too, mental health and healthcare providers, to pay more attention to what they're telling us, because the students don't necessarily think it's that bad. And if we don't say, hey, let's talk about this, because maybe it's worse than you think, then it can get missed. And all right, last thing I'll say, I just read this study and I loved it. When a sleep disorder is reported but not treated, it's a predictor for a really bad outcome, like poor outcome in therapy. But when a sleep problem is reported and treated, it's a predictor for really positive outcome in therapy. So there's really no downside to doing this, and there's a lot of upsides.
Right. It could be a big concern, but I think a lot of providers possibly are not equipped to really treat it. Just like you said, we did not learn it in graduate school. When I got my license, I still did not know much about sleep. I only know sleep hygiene. Right. And then I realized that's not enough.
Right. So, no, and sleep hygiene is like, you can just Google sleep hygiene and you got it.
All the information online. Yeah.
And if that was enough, like Michael Grandner likes to say, if that was enough, then no one would smoke. So you see how that goes. Yeah, it's super important to make these changes to how we perceive what the problems are. And when I was trained, when I was in graduate school for psychology, I was trained, if you treat the depression, the insomnia will go away. If you treat the anxiety, the insomnia will go away. Now we know that's not true.
I just heard from one of my patients, I think, mentioned they got this message from one of their primary care doctor recently. I was like, oh, that's horrible.
It's just not, I mean, the science has evolved. We know better than that now, but not everybody has read or heard the new science. So.
Yeah, we all have to keep on learning. So right. I'm wondering, like, we talk a lot about these challenges, there's great research, there's lots of things we need to consider, but this college population is such a unique population. Yeah. So I'm curious, in your own clinical work, is there one or two things you find really helpful that you say to the college students, or something you do to them to help them shift their perceptions and going the right way and really trying to improve their sleep? That what is useful?
Yeah, one or two is hard, but I like that idea. I'll give you a couple.
Probably not that simple. I know.
Head. Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, right? Because it depends on who I'm talking to. I think for the general consumption, like people who are not so sure that sleep is that important, I give them some of those ideas of, like, you could study 6 hours pulling an all-nighter, but you could also do that work in 3 hours if you just got some sleep. I spout that a lot, and people will often hear that more than they hear, oh, it's just not good for you. But the other one I use, and this might be from a Michael Perlis training, is about people with insomnia. They're often like, I talk about building a house of cards, like it has to be perfect or they're just not going to sleep and it all falls down and they're just awake all night. But instead of doing that, if you think of it as, maybe this is a Don Posner thing, you're waiting on a surfboard to catch a wave, right? You can't make the wave come. You have to put yourself in the right place with the right sort of preparation and attitude, but mostly you're just waiting for, and there, see, there's my wave.
Yeah, perfect. I'm looking at that.
Just waiting for the wave to come, and hopefully you're in a good space to ride it. And if you're not, there's another wave. Like it'll come again, right? You're not broken. You don't have to build the perfect house of cards. You just need to put yourself in the right position to be there. And some students will say to me, I don't surf. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, so let me try this one. You go to somebody's house and they have a cat and you really want to pet the cat. If you go after that cat to pet it, you're never going to pet the cat. You have to put yourself in a calm place, probably very still, and wait. And if you're in a good place, in a good sort of headspace, guess what? Cat's going to come over and be curious about you, and you get to pet the cat. It's the same. It's this, I need to be in a good space at the right time, and sleep will come.
Oh, I love those. I love how you quote research, data, a lot of analogies, right? Because those are very, like a lot of information in it, more detailed.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to a lot of college students and relate to their hobbies, their life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. It totally makes sense.
It
And
totally makes sense. And the analogies like bring it home.
right.
I find analogies are so useful because a
Oh.
lot of people could care less about research. I sleep. I know what sleep's like. Yeah, it's not exactly what you think it is.
Yeah, and I love your analogies better than just saying, well, go with the flow.
Right.
Go with flow is so general. Like a lot of people tell me, well, logically, I know I should go with flow, but in reality, I cannot do it.
Yeah. Well, and it's the old just relax or calm down. Like if it was that easy, you wouldn't even need to tell me. It's never that easy.
Yeah, there's still some preparations. You can help yourself to be a right position, right place, and waiting. It's not just doing nothing, just to wait.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could speak to the college administrators out there, if any of them are listening, I would really, and this is what I do here, I would really encourage them to talk to faculty about changing the deadlines for papers. They're always at midnight. There's no reason for that because you and I both know, and so does every college student, if you make it due at midnight, they're going to finish it at 11:59. Make it due before class the next time you have class, or 6 p.m. There's nothing wrong with that. So changing little changes to campus activities and all that stuff help, you know. It's okay to close the libraries at midnight to send students home. They should be going to bed sometime. Things like that.
Yeah, I love that. A culture, right? A study culture, what we are encouraging.
Right.
And students gonna form their own culture accordingly.
Right. They will follow. If you provide a culture of staying up all night and free coffee during finals 24 hours, students will follow that.
I have to say the coffee thing sounds so attractive, but I also know it's not good.
It's not good for you. Yeah. Yeah. My stomach starts to hurt if I'm drinking coffee too late, but it also keeps me up.
Yeah. Oh, this is wonderful. So if our listeners want to find you, can you mention your website again, or there's any other resources, how they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. I have a private practice. Then you can find me at helpmesleep.org. Everything you need to find me and get a hold of me is right there. I am finishing my work at universities, but I'm still doing a lot of consulting with universities and, presentations to university mental health clinicians. And I'm available to do that work too. But I also do a lot of work with older adults, you know, the 30 to 75-year-old crowd around sleep, insomnia, chronic nightmares. And it's just my favorite thing to do. So yeah, I'd be happy for people to reach out, even if you just have a question. Yeah,
that's awesome. And so I will put all your information on the show notes. So when people, and in the description box, so when people listen to the episode, they should be able to find your information and click through directly.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, any last wisdom you want to share? We can close it here, or if you have any last wisdom.
Oh, man. I said everything. Like always bring a fresh pair of socks. How about that? I don't know what to say. Great. You can edit that out. I
hope I hope our conversation really start making people thinking, right? And this is summertime, especially school gonna start again. And I also know there's a lot of high schoolers, parents are really anxious and help their kids applying for college. But there's something we have to think about.
That's right. And And I'll tell you this, that my son had a major medical problem about 2 years ago as a 20-year-old, and he kept bumping into doctors who was like, "Oh, you're 20, you're okay. Like this can't be that bad," and it was bad, and they were wrong. And I think it's easy for us as older adults to think, "Oh, what how bad can it be? They're 18 or they're 23 and they pull an all-nighter." It's not great. It's really not good for them the same way it's not good for us, no matter what age you are. So taking it seriously and changing that attitude is so important. Um, that I guess that is my takeaway message.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, don't just think college students are young, right? Age is
Right.
not the key issue. Sleep issues can be in our life
Yeah,
at any
yeah,
stage.
that's right. They transcend age from infancy all the way through the geriatric age. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and all this knowledge with us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you for watching our videos or listening to our podcast. If you like our show, please feel free to subscribe, like, and share it. If you have any questions or feedback, we would always love to hear from you. You can either email us or leave feedback on our website at mindbodygarden.com or directly under the YouTube video channel. Thank you very much for your company today, and hopefully to hear from you or have you with us next time.